I'm so excited because today we have Dr. Steve G. Jones as clinical hypnotherapist. He is the master super trainer and life coach, and he's expert in many things. He is a founder of the American Alliance of Hypnosis. He is an American University of NLP. I studied there. I learned a lot from him. Every time Dr. Steve G. Jones has some new program, I jump in that. Because you want to change your life, Dr. Steve G. Jones is the person who can help you. And I'm so excited to introduce today Dr. Steve G. Jones. Hi, Dr. Steve. How are you? I'm very happy to have you here.
Hey, great, Coach Al. How are you doing?
Very happy to have you. In these years, I learned a lot of things from you, especially NLP. NLP is one of the first clues for me to use it as a coach. And I want to ask you one question. A lot of people learn in the school many things, but how you, after studying university, have a doctor's degree, and how you start to introduce all these programs to the world? What create that emotions in you to start to help all over the world, not your community?
Well, the internet was great for that. You know, I used to just teach regular classes and seminars, but the internet has been wonderful for that. And I didn't even have a website until about the year 2000. You know, before that, we were selling CDs, and before that, cassette tapes. So about 2000, I realized that I could reach out on a much bigger scale. So I had my office in Beverly Hills. I thought that was great. I was in the Roxbury Medical Building, 90210. I thought I was on the top of the world, but I was really just on the top of my neighborhood, you know, in California, there in Los Angeles. Once the internet became sophisticated enough and had the proper mechanisms built in, that's what really encouraged me to start branching out beyond just the local market or any city I could go to do a seminar.
The willpower, we use it all the time, but why the willpower has too little power?
Well, willpower is great, but it's more of a conscious process. It's like an engine you have to keep on feeding, whereas if you're programmed on the subconscious level, it's on autopilot. You don't have to think about it. So willpower is where you have to almost force yourself in every situation. Don't smoke that cigarette. Be okay with public speaking. Stop doing this, start doing that. You have to consciously force yourself. You have to power through it in each moment, which for some people can work really well, actually. But for the majority of people, it's much better and much preferable and much easier if you have subconscious programming. That way you don't have to use that conscious force and think about it all the time. And if you stop thinking about it, you may revert to the old behavior. But with subconscious programming, such as with hypnosis and with neurolinguistic programming, it's all done for you. It's on autopilot.
Oh, great. Exactly. I have another question. When you are in gymnastics or in any sports, usually you have mental blocks, mental barriers who stop you to do many things. You see champions in TV who are so close to win, and in the last moment they collapse. And this is something to do with the programs they have inside?
Sometimes. That can be multifactorial. I mean, it can be something, a physical situation that they're dealing with. As you know, athletes are prone to injury from time to time, even younger athletes. Accidents happen. Sometimes people have something distracting going on, something that's happening in their family or their love life or their financial life. But in the majority of cases, if we look at it overall, if someone should perform a certain way and they're not, a lot of times they do have a block going on. They don't really feel they're worthy of it. They don't really feel they should have it. They don't really feel that it's going to be great to have all that positive attention once it does happen. So they will find a way subconsciously to sabotage themselves. And they can affect the minute movements of their body through their subconscious mind in order to cause a failure. And that's sort of shocking how someone would undo themselves like that, but it does actually happen.
Yes, you are totally right. In gymnastics, we face another problem, the fear, because you know, with the
To concentrate, they should focus on blocking everything out. And it doesn't have to be during their gymnastic event that they're doing. It can be in everyday life, you know, talking to someone. Sometimes conversations, especially these days, people get sidetracked by so many things going on at one time. What about just looking at the person and focusing on them and having a conversation with them? So that can work. It can be a discipline that they can learn. And as far as repetition paying off, what we find in the world of neurology, now I'm not a medical doctor, but from the world of neurology, when we look at those studies, we learn that we as humans learn best by repetition, by seeing something as a continuous flow rather than just chunks. So if we have someone practice something the correct way over and over and over again, it becomes a chunk in their minds. This is something that I do. I do all of these movements and it just becomes one. Sort of like learning math. People can learn individual concepts and so forth, but until they work problems, as I call them, over and over and over, they don't learn them as a continuous sequence. But once they do, then that becomes easy from the beginning to the end.
excellent. Yes, you're right. You touched on one special part, the multitask we have in our society. All the kids has many things to do at the same time, the TV, the tablet, the telephone, the texting. They do everything at the time, and that leads to ADD. You know, it has a lot of problems. We have 40% of the kids in ADD. It's one of the programs I start to create to help them. But the other problem is the discipline. The discipline we know comes from home. And there's a way to help the parents to help the kids to learn discipline. What do you think? The parents need to get some kind of guidance, like a teaching, to learn how to educate the kids.
I think that would be fine. You know, when you get into that territory, you get into a few potential fights. Telling parents how to raise their kids is never the most popular thing. So having an opinion is fine. Imposing that opinion or saying that this opinion's right and this is the way they should do things, that can lead to challenges. My personal feel is that everyone's raised differently. Different families have different ideas, different cultures, different religions have different ideas about how people should be raised. I remember I was raised in a fairly strict way, but I had some friends who it seems like they could do whatever they wanted to. Well, somehow we all turned out okay. We all turned out to be respectable adults. So when you get into that territory, I would offer a few theories, which would be that yes, you can share that discipline with your kids if you want to learn to focus on one thing at a time. But we're also battling against technology. Now, I have no doubt that in a few years we will have machines integrated with us in some way. You know, we have Google Glass already, and they have contacts that you can wear that will now take pictures. So we're starting to integrate with machinery more and more, and with computers more and more. Eventually, it won't be a matter of telling a kid to put their phone down, because their phone will be somehow attached to their bodies, and further down the road, they may actually be built in somehow to their bodies. So we need to understand these things. We need to embrace what's actually happening and perhaps offer some guidance to parents if they want to take it that might help kids stay focused in this ever-changing world.
You're right. And you know, all the families, every family has their own way to educate their kids. We try to help the most we can with new ideas. And there's another thing you start to speak about, that is the words we use. We know in NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, this is the most important, the words we use. I notice the athletes, when they start to practice and they make bad things, they judge themselves. They start to punish themselves because probably it's the program they have inside. And what happened with the NLP? The NLP helped them to change those programs they are running.
Oh, absolutely. And it can be very simple when you look at, I worked with a professional pitcher about 15 years ago, a professional baseball pitcher, and one of the things you'll notice that pitchers do is they have a routine before they pitch the ball. They may swipe the the pitcher's mound with their foot. They may bring the ball back. There are little things that they do. Sometimes those things are because of some sort of superstition, some sort of obsessive-compulsive routine that they're going through. But in either case, and also the third case, which is they've realized that's an anchor for success, in either of those three cases, superstition, OCD, which can also be a superstition, or anchoring, what we find is if they have a routine that they go through that they think is going to aid in their performance, it actually does. So that's one easy way to use neurolinguistic programming, which neurolinguistic programming can be defined on a very simple basis as causing an association. So if they have an association between doing a ritual and having success, then more power to them. And I worked with a pitcher a few years back to give him a ritual which would mean success, bringing in the idea of having that perfect pitch, meaning going exactly where he wanted it to if he did this certain ritual, which was not an attention-grabbing ritual, because pitchers are on stage, essentially, especially professional pitchers. They've got people on TV watching them and in the stands. So they don't want to do something that makes people laugh or draws unnecessary negative attention, but just something very simple that looks like a normal part of pitching right beforehand can be very powerful.
Excellent. Yes, exactly right. That means some athletes has the wrong, it's a ritual too, to make them get into the zone. When they learn the ritual correctly, they get into the zone fast. What you can describe about the zone, what you describe as a psychologist, the zone for the athletes?
The zone would be getting into that place where they feel like it's going to be okay. And having studied cognitive psychology, there's something called the speed efficiency trade-off. You know, the faster you do something, the less efficient you do something. So you have to find that sweet spot between the two. That's usually for more active sports, interactive sports such as basketball or football. Gymnastics is an individual sport, and baseball, to a large degree, is non-interactive in that they're individual movements being performed by individuals. They're not, ideally, they're not colliding with each other usually, except to tag one person. But the being in the zone is where you want the athlete to be, and we can do this through installing an anchor, ideally. You know, as I mentioned, some pitchers and a lot of people in a lot of different situations have a routine they go through before they do something that centers them and focuses them. But to install that, you just have them picture having done it perfect, like you said, having them imagine going through the routine, but doing it perfectly, and then coming up with a word and a movement that anchors that. So maybe they're imagining themselves doing it perfectly, and this would be done before they even get out there, and then they think the word perfection, for example. Maybe they make the OK sign when they think that. Seems like a simple procedure, but it's actually based on Pavlovian research. Ivan Pavlov, the Russian scientist whose parents wanted him to be a priest, by the way, and he decided to be a scientist instead, thank goodness for us. And he realized that you can associate things. You know, you can have a dog smell meat powder and ring a bell at the same time. Eventually you just ring the bell and the dog starts to salivate. Well, it's the same concept when we imagine doing our gymnastics perfectly, and I don't do gymnastics, by the way, but when a gymnast imagines doing their gymnastics perfectly, making the OK sign and saying perfection, well, that's anchored it, just like ringing the bell when smelling meat powder. So then when they are in that situation where they need to have that power, all they have to do is make the OK sign and think or say the word perfection, and they're back. They're anchored to that, and then they can go ahead and proceed with a much better chance of doing it the right way.
Excellent. But more scientifically speaking, how you can describe anchor?
It's a connection between two things. So, for example, you may have touched a hot stove before and you realize, ooh, that's hot. So now just maybe the glow of the stove is an anchor for fear, and maybe your blood pressure will actually go up. Maybe you'll start sweating a little bit. Seeing police lights in your rearview mirror, you know, maybe you've been pulled over before for a traffic ticket or something else, and you know that it may not go that well. You may end up having to pay money. So if you see police lights in your rearview mirror, you may start to perspire a little bit. Your blood pressure may go up. You may get nervous. That's an anchor. We can also have positive anchors. As I mentioned, we can imagine doing something perfectly, doing it the right way, and creating that anchor. Touching our fingers together in the OK sign, or doing any other action, and saying the word perfection. It's always better when you have an action and a word, so it just becomes more powerful in that you're involving more senses. And there you're involving kinesthetic sense of movement and touch, and also the auditory sense of hearing and saying the word. So you create an anchor. So those are the positive anchors we want. But anchors are just associations that happen all day, every day, normally. We're just taking more direct control of them with neurolinguistic programming and using them for something beneficial.
Wow. Always it's nice to speak with you, because you have tons of ideas, tons of notes to join with everybody. In NLP, we use a lot of these images or minds. How you can recommend the athletes to start to find out how they perform better?
Well, I think that in athletics, the main benefit is having a video of the process so you can see it from a different perspective. And working with a coach like yourself, different things can be pointed out. This was done the right way, and this needs a little bit of work. And I think the best thing that they can get is after they do something the right way, to be told that was the right way. So right after they do it, they still have that feeling, that sense of doing it, and they know that that was the right way. That's what you want more of. So that's positive reinforcement, which is from B.F. Skinner, from the world of behaviorism. We get that from psychology. They're reinforced to do that. But they're also, in the NLP world, they're being able to kind of encode the mental image of having done it, the feeling, the sights, the sounds, everything, as the right way to do it. So they'll be able to repeat it. And by the way, you can anchor something right after you do it. That's the best way to do it. So in other words, if they go ahead and do the routine perfectly, they're told by the coach they did it perfectly, they can go ahead and anchor it. With the anchor, this can be the anchor, and they can say perfection. That way is anchored so they know not only to have the good feelings, but they actually have the sense of, in this case, mainly the kinesthetic sense of having performed it. So then they can fire it off again by doing this and saying the word perfection before doing it again, so that they can have a repeat of that perfect way of doing things.
Wow. Yes. This is what we need to do with all the coaches who are listening. Start to learn all the process of anchoring, because this is what you do. You can anchor good things or bad things. Every kid has different abilities, and always is a genius of you inside, not just for sports, in any area. You need to explore that. Sports is important because the sport will give you more health, more ability to move your body. In this society, we have a lot of problems to move because we use the car, we use the seat, the computers all day long, the TV, and then moving. And that's why I encourage every kid to practice sports. And I work at kids with ADD. This is my main program right now. I create a program for ADD kids. How you can change the mind frequency, because we know the mind works in frequencies, and if we function better and we go to alpha when we relax.
As far as changing frequencies, during hypnosis we change frequencies. We are normally in beta, which you mentioned, which is full awakening consciousness, where we are wide awake and aware of everything. If we slow down just a little bit, we're in alpha. We can go into alpha without even realizing it. When we watch TV, when we read a book, when we take a shower, when we vacuum, when we drive sometimes, when we do something that doesn't really require our full concentration because it's a rote activity for us. We know how to do it. We're on autopilot. So this is a normal occurrence for us. The interesting thing is that anytime we're below beta, anytime we go into alpha or lower, which would be theta or delta, the sleep states, we are in hypnosis, and we don't even realize it. So when we're reading a book, watching TV, vacuuming, showering, doing those things, we are usually in a hypnotic state. in which case we're very suggestible. So we don't need to, during the day, we don't need to make ourselves go down there, because these are things that fluctuate naturally as we go throughout our day. We go from alpha to beta all the time, all throughout the day. And it's at night we go between the lower states of theta and delta as we sleep. But these are stages that we would go into during hypnosis. So you don't have to consciously learn how to do those unless you're practicing meditation. Let's say if you're practicing meditation, then you want to slow yourself down. Now you may think, well, how do I know when I'm in alpha or theta or delta? If you're slowed down just a little bit, you slow down your concentration on just one thing, you can rest assured that you're in alpha. That can be a very resourceful state if you want to just focus on something like a laser and get things done. A lot of people lack that ability. That's something that's been very beneficial to me, is being able to just focus on one thing until it's done. So getting yourself into that state can be very resourceful. When you're listening to the hypnosis recording, it does it for you. If you're an athlete doing your event, if you just focus on what you're doing, you don't have to worry about anything. You will go into that alpha state where things are free-flowing for you.
Yes, exactly right. It's very important for everybody to know then they don't need to be worried about what frequency they are, because what we need to do is just concentrate on one thing at a time. I want to hear some specific explanation about what hypnosis is, especially because some parents have the misconception what hypnosis is. They start to think there's manipulation, it's this one, it's that one. You already partially is. What you recommend to the parents or to the kids to understand and tell the parents what hypnosis is?
Well, it's just a relaxed state of mind. It's nothing to be worried about. It's nothing to be concerned about. It's not voodoo or anything like that. It's something that you go into every day. You're in and out of hypnosis every day. So, for example, with a child, when they wake up in the morning, let's say the alarm goes off, they wake up. They're in beta, wide awake, full awakening consciousness, aware of what's going on. If they slow down a little bit, they start to doze back to sleep, because who wants to wake up at 6 a.m.? They go back into alpha, and then they can go back down into theta and delta. And then if the parents are like my dad, they'll come in the room and say, get up, in which case the child goes back into full awakening consciousness, which is beta. Now they may get on a school bus, let's say, and maybe it's just a normal day and they're just riding on a bus, and they'll go back down to alpha. And they'll get to school and they'll see their friends, they'll be back in beta, full awakening consciousness. They'll get into their desk, and maybe it's not the most exciting day at school, they'll go back down to alpha. Anytime they're in alpha or lower, they're in hypnosis. So this child hasn't even really begun his or her day yet at school. They've just gotten to the desk. They've already been in hypnosis several times. The only difference between that and what's on a hypnosis recording are two things. Number one, the hypnotist is causing the person to go into hypnosis by using relaxing words as opposed to letting it happen naturally. And number two, positive suggestions are being put in their minds while they're there, as opposed to whatever they're seeing on TV or whatever the teacher may be saying or whatever they may be hearing on the school bus. Positive suggestions are going to their mind. They're going to help them. You have been perhaps going through life, on autopilot, just responding to the environment, but you can absolutely take charge of it. So by doing things such as anchoring, positive affirmations can help also. Hypnosis programs like the ones we're talking about that I have, that we're talking about today, those are all designed to change what we might be calling bad habits. I don't like the words good or bad per se, but effective and ineffective habits that are working for us and habits that aren't working for us. That's my definition of good or bad. If it's working for you, great. If it's not, then you need to change it, and it's absolutely possible.
I'm so excited that we make an amazing day today to all the knowledge Dr. Steve G. Jones has. And I recommend to you, my athletes, all the coaches, who give you the opportunity to the sun and keep working, because the world needs you. The world needs your motivation to keep going in this world. We have a lot of things. Dr. Steve G. Jones, I'm so happy that you give us all those advices. You always has amazing ideas, and I cannot. And I'm very glad you was with us. Any final words you can say to all our audience and all these kids?
Well, you know, there's an older song by the group America, and it goes like this. It's about the Wizard of Oz, and it says, Oz never did give nothing to the Tin Man that he didn't already have. And what that's saying is, you know, the Tin Man and the Wizard of Oz already had what he needed, but the Wizard of Oz gave him a physical representation of that so that he could really feel it. It's sort of that way with hypnosis. We're not giving you, through hypnosis, anything you don't already have. We're just helping you reach in and pull it out of yourself. So sometimes you need that little motivation to see how awesome and amazing and beautiful and wonderful and powerful and talented you are. That's where hypnosis comes into play and really makes a huge difference in your life.
Thank you so much, Dr. Steve G. Jones. I'm so glad that you was here with us, and thanks so much.
Well, thank you, Coach Al. Thanks for making this possible.